Welcome to Soberly Speaking. I'm Julia Rangiheuia. Patrick's struggle wasn't just with alcohol and drugs. They were symptoms of a much deeper issue, his inability to sit with discomfort. For years, he convinced himself that once my mental health is under control, then I'll stop drinking. A lie I'm sure we've all told ourselves at some point. In the beginning, alcohol seemed like the solution, the only way to do things he felt he couldn't do on his own. But as his addiction spiraled, he suddenly realised where it was inevitably leading. Death. His parents dropped him off at rehab, and it was there that a counsellor spoke 3 simple words that changed everything for him. Trigger warning, we discuss themes of substance abuse in this episode. I hope you love this chat with Patrick. Patrick, where do we begin? I think at the start is best. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in, where did I grow up? I grew up in a suburb called Ivanhoe, which is here in Melbourne. I lived there with my family for about 12 years. And then we moved as a family to a suburb called Deepdean, which is like next to Balwyn, very small suburb. We lived there for a bit. Then my parents kind of not so subtly told us that we've had enough of living with you. So they moved into a semi-retirement village.
Wait, how old were you?
I was like 21.
Okay. I'm thinking like 12 years of age.
I was like 20,
Okay.
21. And they were like, that was their way of going, time for you guys to spread your wings. And so they moved into a place that like literally couldn't have people as young as us living there. So then I moved into a share house with some randoms, lived there for a bit, met my girlfriend, lived with her for a bit. I'm conscious that your question was, where did you grow up? And I've just got to like.
Look, I'm in it,
yeah.
but I would love to know what you were like as a child. What was your personality like?
I was always looking for attention. I had a real craving for attention. But at the same time, it was like once I got the attention, I didn't really know what to do with it. I kind of just wanted to be heard. I had a few creative outlets. Like I was really interested in theatre. I did a bit of theatre. I did a lot of sport. I grew up in an environment that was kind of very community-based. I went to a big all-boys school. I was around a lot of team sport. I liked having fun a lot. But I would say that even in those sort of years, what was definitely present was just like an overwhelming feeling of like I'm trying to fit in, but I'm not absolutely sure that I am fitting in. And it was like just trying to find my place. And I wouldn't say I felt like deeply uncomfortable, but I certainly didn't feel comfortable. And I would say that was probably typical of me throughout sort of growing up, but also in like my teenage years as well.
How many siblings do you have?
Older sister.
Yeah.
So my sister is 5 years older than me. We're very different personalities, but we're also very similar in some respects as well. But I would say we're probably very different personalities. And like we had a good relationship. I think we've never really talked about it at great depth, but I'm sure like we were going through the same sort of stuff. And I think a lot of people at that age are going through the same stuff anyway. I don't think I'm unique in that sense, but like that kind of whole notion of trying to find your place, trying to fit in, wondering if you do fit in, like that was probably typical for a lot of people around that time.
What was your family unit like? And I ask this because I think with sobriety and with healing comes reflection. And although we might have had parents who were together, who sent us to private boarding schools, who put the clothes on our back, we look back and we think, oh, there wasn't a lot of emotional support or emotional acceptance. Do you look back on your childhood and think, I love my parents, but I think they fell flat there?
Yes. Well, look, this is one of those ones that I've had to do a lot of work on. I certainly, when I came into recovery and started to get sober, I certainly started to look at things in a different way, and I started to, as you said, reflect on my childhood. And, you know, if that didn't go that way, where would I be today? If that person said that to me, what if, you know, all these what ifs. And I think what I've learned in all of this is that my parents did the best they could. They were from a certain generation, particularly my dad. Like, my dad's quite a bit older than me. Like, he's in his late 70s. Mm-hmm. The world that they came out of is very different to mine. I think my mother was sort of more naturally in touch with those sort of things. I mean, they both had their kind of roles, as any partnership sort of does. One will lean more naturally into one thing than the other. And I think my mum certainly, I probably had more emotional, vulnerable chats with my mum than I did with my dad. But in answer to your question, like, I think what I've learned about my childhood is that it wasn't the worst and it wasn't the best. It was sort of probably somewhere in between there. Like, I've met a lot of people in recovery, and part of the program that I'm part of is that, like, I'm always around people that are trying to get sober, and I've heard some like horrific stories of growing up. And it doesn't, not to say that I go, oh, well, stop complaining, but it's like, it certainly does put things into perspective. Like, could there have been more emotional support? Sure.
Yeah.
But were they incredibly supportive in other areas? Like, absolutely. And I wouldn't be sober today, like, without them. Like, that's the reality. Like, they really held my hand, took me to rehab. They were like the last two support units left for me. And so it's one of those things, like, I go in there and it's like, yeah, oh, geez, wouldn't it be better if I had better parents and if they did this? And it's like, yeah, but what have they actually done for you as opposed to what you think they haven't done for you? So
Does addiction run in your family?
It's a good question. I think not in my immediate family. I certainly think I had a grandpa or a grandma on one side.
Yeah, but it's not like prevalent.
No. It's my family love having a drink. My dad in particular, though, has probably tapered off significantly. Like, he had a heart attack like a couple of years ago, and the doctor said, you know, cut it out, and he said sure. And so he's sort of wind it back. And I think my journey in getting sober has probably encouraged them to reevaluate their own relationship with alcohol, and that's a great thing too.
Yeah, it's amazing when that happens. When was the first time you had a drink?
I was 13. I was at my sister's 18th birthday party. I had two friends there, and like, we couldn't get anything done that week because we were just thinking about how we're going to drink. Like, it was just like
the grand plans you make during school.
Massive.
Yeah, it was massive.
I'm surprised school even sat that week, because we were all, like, it's all we were talking about. And we're going to go to the garage and we're going to get like 3 VBs and we're going to hide them, and then we're going to go back out. Like, it was so much planning, and then we did it. And I was just like, it was, and I absolutely believe I was like an alcoholic from the get-go. Like, my change in personality was just so like radical. I went from not really being able to look anyone in the eye at that party or talk to anyone to literally walking around and wanting to talk to everyone. So that sense of wanting to be close to people came at the first drink, and it was like I was off and running, and like, I could not shut up. And I kept on. I don't really remember a lot from that night, but I do remember going up to random people and asking them to check my pupils. Like, I was just like, so like, I was, for whatever reason, I found that, like, because apparently people talked about that. They were like, oh, when you're on drugs and you drink, like, your pupils dilate. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. So I was just going up to random people, like, asking them, are my pupils okay? And they were like, yeah, they're fine. Like, it was just like.
And you're 13.
Yeah, I was 13. I was like, and look, to be honest with you, like, it's a bit sad, but it is still probably like one of the only like real positive memories I have from drinking, unfortunately. That and maybe a couple of other times here and there, but really I think what stood out at that point in time was that I was 13. I didn't have any real worries or concerns in my life, very carefree, probably lacked a lot of the insecurities that I would then go and have. And so it was drinking without any real sense of consequences or anything like that.
So you love alcohol from your first sip at 13. What age is that? Year 8, year 9?
I think I was in year 7 actually.
Oh, year 7?
Yeah,
Okay.
I reckon it was year 7. So I might even have been 12 because I think it was my sister's 18th. She was born. Anyway, I'm not going to do the maths now.
Got it.
But I
young,
was,
right?
Yeah.
How does that work whilst just obviously you're not going to wake up and start drinking, you got, school to do. Was it just you and your friends trying to source alcohol every weekend? How does that look for the next 5 years at high school?
I wouldn't say it didn't kick off an insatiable thirst for more. I just remember thinking how much I love the effect. I hated the taste, and I kind of maintain throughout my drinking, I never really enjoyed the taste of alcohol. But at the time, I remember thinking that it unlocked something in me that I was in love with. Like, I just loved the personality that it gave me. And so I didn't drink much. I had probably another couple of times in between there. But then once I finished school and any real kind of obligations and responsibilities were over, I was off and running then. But even then, like I think one of the things that I've learnt about alcoholism is its progressive nature. And, I actually was for a period of time there drinking in a manner that society would probably consider normal, that sort of binge drinking on the weekends. And then, a bit further down the track was when it really sort of got into sort of dangerous problem areas. But, the thing that stands out from those early moments was just the effect. Like, I just love the effect.
Mm. What age were you when it went from that everyone does this and this is, society's way to connect to, I'm starting to drink a bit more than everyone else here? What age was that?
I would have been in my mid-20s, I think, and you would know this from experience, like having a partner really does shine a light on not just your drinking, any behavior. Like, particularly I was living with her at the time. So all of my defects of character were like, here they are, and we're living together, and you can sort of see that in each other. But I remember she started finding bottles and things like that. But before that, I remember feeling, I didn't drink for a couple of days. And I remember sitting on the couch and I felt like physically so shit. And I remember like clenching my hands, and I was like shaking a bit. And I was like, what is going on here? And I actually Googled, like, I'm 2 days, I just started writing, I'm on 2 days since my last drink and I'm doing this. And then the first thing that spat out the internet was alcohol withdrawal and an article on alcohol withdrawal. And I kept on reading it and I realized that's what I was experiencing. Like, I'd been drinking so much for a period of time that I'd got to a point where my body and my brain were so used to having alcohol present in my system that the absence of alcohol caused me to go into wasn't a serious episode, but I just remember feeling uneasy and anxious. And that's when I remember thinking, like, typical alcoholic, I didn't think stop drinking. I said, I've just got to be drunk all the time. Like, that was like literally the thought I had. I thought, we just got to drink more. But at the same time, having that thought, I remember thinking, gee, this isn't great.
Plants the seed, hey?
Yeah. And I thought, well, this is not ideal. And I don't think normal people are experiencing that.
I was the same. I was always Googling things before I went sober, like, if I have 21 drinks, does that make me an alcoholic? And I feel like if you're starting to do those things, the call is coming from within the house,
I think if you're on Google for like anything, it's like something is obviously gnawing away at your subconscious that you're finding the need. But, the strangest experience I had on Google was when I read an article that said, this is what end stage alcoholism looks like. This is what the gray area looks like. And it pointed out a timeline. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, I'm not at the end stage yet. So I have more drinking to do until I get to the end stage. But what I failed to actually grasp about that was that end stage, you're dead. And so, but in my mind, I thought, well, I'm still a little bit further away from death so I can keep drinking. And that's honestly what I took from reading something like that. And I think what I've heard so much and what I'm sure you've heard so much is that idea of we're scared to stop drinking, but it doesn't actually outweigh or does outweigh the fear that we have of quitting and or of continuing. And so for me, I look at that and I go, well, I've got more drinking to do, and I'm more fearful of quitting than I am of actually getting to the end stage and no longer being here. And that really at the time should have been a good giveaway that I was in trouble.
What did your life look like from a bird's eye view? You obviously had the partner, were you renting, were you at work?
I think I took a while to really get any of my pieces together. And a big part of that was because I was so incapable of so many things. Like I couldn't understand my own emotions. Like I couldn't talk about my own emotions. I couldn't be relational with people. I couldn't, mental health was so, appallingly bad and not being treated. Physically, I wasn't in great shape because of how much I was drinking. Like I had no accessibility to any of myself. So I couldn't really be much in the world itself. So for a lot of years there, I was living a very lonely existence with alcohol. I was isolating a lot. I lost friends because I just stopped connecting with the world around me. When I found a partner, in many respects, she kind of gave me some oxygen for a period of time there. And we lived together and I sort of slowly started to get going in life. But the real dark irony in all of this is that alcohol for a period of time there really helped me get going in doing things.
This, yeah.
And so one of those common things people are always like, how did it go for so long? Like, how can you drink for so long? Simple answer, it works. Alcohol did for me what I couldn't do for myself for a period of time there. And then I think right at the end there where things were really bad, still externally they would have looked okay. But I think by the end there, I was just so crushed. Like my soul was just non-existent and I didn't have any real moral, ethical compass. I didn't have anyone that really knew me that well. I had all these surface level connections. The relationship ended and it was sort of like I said just moments ago, like I was on the doorstep of a rehab with mum and dad, and that was kind of my life. What it had got down to was me, mum, dad, suitcase with my stuff, and that was it.
How do you get to that point where mum and dad are physically coming to kind of drop you off essentially? Do you call them and say, I've got an issue, I'm in under my head, I'm in over my head? What does that look like? So the relationship ended, COVID happened, and I moved in with mum and dad, and I was probably towards the start of 2020, and we didn't plan on it being a long stay, but COVID happened and COVID kind of threw everything. Particularly, I remember at that point you couldn't even go and look at places physically. So I was living with them. We got locked down a few times. I had periods of sobriety living with them because that was a condition. That they put on you?
Yeah, big time.
Did they say that?
Did they sit
you
they
down
said, they said, we're not going to drink and you're not going to drink either. They encouraged me to re-engage with Alcoholics Anonymous, which I did and then didn't do. And I had periods of sobriety. And I think for a moment there, we were actually enjoying each other's company. We're all sober. We're all having some really nice conversations, some really interesting conversations. I was more present. But then that fateful day came where I did what alcoholics do best, and that was drink. And then from that moment, I was just back to the start again, hiding bottles, alcohol withdrawal, drinking to get through the withdrawals, all of it. Basically everything that my partner had experienced, they then experienced firsthand, and they started to go, you need to do something. That was we feel for you and we wish you weren't in this position, but you have to help yourself. No one is going to do this for you. And they strongly encourage rehab, and I was hesitant about rehab. I was still trying to plug into like that last little bit of self-will of like, I can fix this, I can do this, I'm going to do it my way. And then I was on the phone to this woman from the rehab who owned the rehab, and she was doing my assessment, and she was asking me about my drinking and all this sort of stuff. And I was giving her these answers in a way that she would then end the call and say, oh, no, you don't need to go to rehab. You're fine. Like, it's not.
Were you lying to her?
Well, I was basically giving her a version of the truth, but it was like, but she was a pro. She'd been in this industry for, I think, upwards of 30 years. She had decades of sobriety. She'd helped thousands of people do this. Everything I was saying was just totally like, and we've caught up since, and she was like, yeah, it was hilarious. Like the stuff you were saying. Like,
do you remember anything?
Yeah, I was explaining my drinking, and then I was saying things like, oh, but once my mental health is under control, I don't think my drinking will be such an issue anymore. And she was listening to me go, oh, really? Yeah, that's interesting. You think you're mental? Yeah, right. Okay. She was being very nice. But then at the end of it, I said to her, well, what do you think? And she goes, well, you're in hell at the moment because you absolutely qualify to be in treatment, but you are still thinking that you can somehow fight this, or you can somehow force enough self-will that you can solve the problem. Like, this problem you have is only going to be solved through a total surrender of what you are, and maybe for the first time actually accepting help from people. So you're in no man's land. And she said, yeah, so you can come, there's a bed here, but you've got to let me know in the next sort of 24 hours, or we'll give it to someone who wants it and needs it, probably more in that order. And then I sat in the middle of this oval, and I was like, oh, what other alternatives do I have here? I can keep drinking and meet the end that meets people who continue to drink and drug or I can maybe see this as an opening.
And did you know at that stage that you needed external help? Like, you knew that you wouldn't be able to do this alone?
Well, I probably wouldn't have put it in such clear terms to myself, but by that stage I'd been trying to get sober for a couple of years, and in that time it would be 20-30 days drink, and round it went. So I knew through my experience that I was kind of it was just that fork in the road. It was like, make a decision, do something about this or continue drinking. But I remember my parents were, like I said, like they were just like, stop making it our problem. Like, we're not the ones who are sick here, because we can't actually facilitate your addiction, your sickness, if you don't want to help yourself. And I found that to be really brutal feedback at the time, but in hindsight, it was the best thing they could have done for me. I walked back in home. I said to Dad, yeah, just talk to this woman. I reckon I'm going to go. And he goes, great, I'll pack you back.
They're like, quick, jump on this before he changes his mind.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And we got in the car, we went there, and that was that.
You walk through the doors, and this is what I've heard from a lot of people who I've interviewed. They always go, I didn't belong there. I wasn't as bad as everyone.
They didn't belong at rehab.
Yeah, they didn't belong. Did you have any thoughts like that, or were you like, I'm so open to any help I can get?
I was, I walked in, I remember, I've never been more scared in my life than when I walked in there, because it was such a uncontrolled environment. It's like people sitting around, like, and I felt like naked, like totally, didn't know what to do with my hands, didn't know where to sit, didn't know whether I should look at people in the eye or not look at people in the eye.
It's like your first day of school.
Yeah. Well, it really was. Like, I was just so fish on dry land, trying to think of another better analogy. That'll do.
I got you, yeah.
And I was just like, so for that period, I was like, I know I don't want to be here, but I don't think it was like I didn't fit in. I knew I needed to be there. My first one-on-one that I had with my counsellor there, who's still my counsellor today because he went into private practice not long after. And we sat down, we were chatting, and I was still just putting on this facade, like, mate, like I was just all bullshit, like just wanting to keep up appearances. And he said something like, like, I get paid a lot of money to just help people come through the other side of addiction, mental health. I don't know you outside of here. We're probably not going to know each other much when you leave here. you don't need to do any of this for me, in a really loving way. You can just talk to me and I'll listen and I'll give you the space. And we kept talking, and he eventually just looked at me and he said, you are enough, just so you know. And I had never heard anyone say that to me before. And I just sat there in silence, and he just held his eye contact with me, and it just was enough to make me start crying. And I was like, that hadn't happened for, can't even remember the last time I cried, because of how numb I had been and how, but it just hit me as hard as anything's ever hit me. And at the time, I just remember I didn't even understand why it had got me so hard. And for the next 2 hours, I remember being out in the community and being on the couch and just looking into space, and people were just like, oh, he just got hit with so-and-so. And we had a laugh about it as well. Rehabs were great for that, to be able to be so traumatized, but then have a laugh about it at the same time. And I remember just talking, and then even today, I don't see him regularly. I usually see him when something pops up and I need to do some work with him for 4 or 5 weeks, and then we go separate ways. But every time I see him, I always say to him, look, thank you so much for saying that. And he just said, you needed to hear it. You desperately needed someone, kind of didn't even matter who, just someone to tell you that, because you had been just going on autopilot for so long, thinking you were so beneath everything, that you needed someone to actually say that you're not more than enough, you're not less than enough. What you are, who you are, is more than enough for any situation that you're walking into. And I think the fact that it kind of hit me like that, it was true that I just needed to hear someone say that to me. And that really sort of planted the seed for the recovery that would follow. And I would say today it's still the thing that has to be almost at the core of my recovery, because it's been a little bit of time now since I've had a drink, but I feel like I'm always recovering from something, whether it's a breakup, whether it's a relationship, that it's there's always something that those core beliefs that I once held can be challenged again. And so I can go through a period of time going, oh shit, maybe I'm going through self-esteem study, and I have to remind myself, no, remember what he said to you that first session. You're enough. You can go through this, and yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. Even when you just looked into my eyes and you said you are enough, it still shocks me, because I think at the core of our addictions, it's not about the alcohol or drugs. That's actually the 1% of what is the actual problem, and it's that feeling of unworthiness and not being loved. You check out of rehab. How do you operate life from there on? Oh no,
like a shit show. I stayed sober, but I didn't know how to do anything. I went into transition house, which was, I used to call it the halfway house, but then I was corrected because it's no, it's actually not a halfway house. It's a transition house. And I was same thing. Anyway.
So is that after you detox and rehab, then you go to the transition house?
So I did 3 months of rehab, detoxed, did a lot of therapy, a lot of 12-step stuff, and then I went to transition. And transition is for people that have completed a period of the program, but it provides a few things. It provides accommodation, some routine. So we would go to meetings together. We would still have one-on-ones and group therapy, but it was probably less program and a bit more freedom. Transition though, it was locked down again. I got out of there and I think I had 1 week of experiencing life, and then we got locked down again. So I was doing a lot of online meetings, but I started working a little bit, but I just found everything taxing. And it's funny because I employ someone today who's in recovery, and it's hilarious. And I have so much love and support for him, but at the same time, it's just all coming back.
Really?
He'll I don't want to talk too much because he'll probably listen to this, but he'll just do a certain amount of tasks and he'll be I'm cooked. And I'm like, yeah, and I get that, because it's just like your brain is finally like working in a way that it hasn't ever worked before. And it's tiring and it's emotionally like taxing. And so I remember that very vividly, being in transition and like going out for coffee with someone and finding that exhausting. And then having to go to another thing at night and see more people. And I just like, everything was just hard. And I don't say that to make anyone feel daunted by the prospect, but at the same time, I still wanted to be sober, even though it was not comfortable a lot of the time. And I remember I tried dating, and that was just a disaster as well. And I did that, and I found that exhausting.
How'd you meet? Like as a non-drinker, how did you meet people?
Just apps.
Okay.
So I was just on apps, and the good thing about those lockdown rules was like you could go out for like an hour of exercise.
It's
so
like
it wasn't
walking,
like you didn't have to commit to a big event. So I met like a few different people, but I had no idea about how to talk with boundaries. Like they would say something like, "Why don't you drink?" 10 minutes later, I've told them my entire life story. I've told them about trauma. I've told them about fucking mental health, and they're just looking at me going, all right, that's great. Like
delete.
More or less, like very lovely, but they were just like, that's a lot. And so I had to learn about all that stuff, about how to have conversations with people, not having to spill everything. But it was, it was a challenging early time. And then I got out of transition, and I moved in with someone who was also in recovery. I still live with that person today. And then I really threw myself into the spiritual program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's kind of the center of my life today. And it's been a huge. I mean, if hasn't been the whole reason, it's been a lion's share of the reason why I've been able to maintain my sobriety and having a sense of peace with myself.
Can you describe that recovery for me and the listeners? Like, what does that actually look like?
12-step?
Yeah.
Yeah. I won't go into too much detail, but it's stuff that is accessible online anyway. It's a spiritual program. Everything in the program are suggestions. But my experience has been that doing those suggested things. There's a friend of mine who says suggestive instead of suggested. It always makes me laugh when I'm in a meeting. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But in doing those suggested things, I've been able to find peace with myself and peace with other people. And it's the simplest way I can describe the process. Part of that process is about mending relationships. Part of that process is about understanding my character defects, the things that are going to hold me back and things that I need to be aware of. It's about community. It's about connection. There's so much in it. And I think it's one of those things that I resisted for a period of time, but I resisted it because it just made me uncomfortable. And I've learnt over time that I have to see things that make me uncomfortable and be prepared to do it and try to ride out that discomfort. Because I think, like, ultimately, like you just mentioned before about, like, it's not just alcohol. Like, alcohol is the tip of the iceberg. The stuff that was underneath all that was an inability to deal with discomfort a lot of the time. And like a good friend of mine pointed out recently, like, a lot of people don't walk around in life constantly seeking relief. And I felt like that was my life, like relief. And today I seek relief every so often, but it's a normal amount and it's usually when the real kind of life events come up. In those days though, I felt like I was just always needing relief. And it's like, that's the giveaway. If you are always so unhappy by the state that you're in, maybe there's something to do with so. And then from there, it's not just about not picking up or picking up. It's about so much more than that. And I feel like that's where the program that I'm part of, that really kind of, that's where the rubber hits the road. Like someone pointed out to me, like when I first came back in, it's like we mentioned alcohol once in the steps. And it's in the first step. From then on, we deal with life. And this is about living in the world, being okay with the world, people in it, navigating conflict, navigating things that don't go your way, resentment, all of it. Like there's a lot to kind of unpack in those 12 steps, but they've been life-changing for me. And the most amazing thing about it is that when you finish those steps, you get the opportunity to go and take someone through those steps, and you can become a sponsor. And so today I sponsor other men and work with them on a daily basis on getting sober, great, but also finding that peace within themselves and with other people. And that is the most incredible thing to see in someone, because you know how bloody amazing it was, and you would know how amazing it was when you got sober, and how when the penny finally dropped that, oh shit, maybe I don't have to live like this anymore. And seeing that penny drop in someone else is just like, it's magic. It's incredible.
Have you ever been tempted? Was there ever a lapse, a slip up, anything like that?
I think in the first, so I think it was 2018 when I first said to my parents that I've got a problem with drinking. And I didn't say it. I wrote it down on a piece of paper because I couldn't even find the words. And I think I was thinking about that on the way here, like, God, things have changed. Like I'm literally in a studio talking like at length with you about this. And in those days, I couldn't even say anything out loud because I was so filled with shame. And I wrote that on a piece of paper, and I was first introduced to AA, and then I did a bit of that, and I was sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I mean, they're relapses, but I also don't think I ever really stopped to some degree. Like I would get 25 days up and then I would drink. Yeah. In terms of this current recovery, I don't think I ever really crave a drink. I crave a distraction a lot of the time, and I probably wasn't understanding the difference between the two, and now I do. And that's where like sponsorship can come in, because I remember I would say to my sponsor, I'd say, I just walked past, in my first year, I was walking along the beach, and there were all these work Christmas parties, and I could hear that like buzz,
that energy, that naughty energy.
Yeah, it's all happening, and it's just like, I was having a great day. I remember I was like having a really great day, and in the space of like a minute and a half, I felt this wave of sadness, grief, feeling separate, being disconnected, not being part of it. All just came like, say what you want, like alcoholics, we can feel our feelings, and it all just came in a rush. And I remember I sat down like on the beach, and I rang my sponsor, and I was like, oh God, I really want to drink. And he goes, all right, what's happened? And I told him, and he goes, oh, well, you don't want to drink. You want to be able to drink like them.
You want to feel included.
And you want to be included. This is not about having a drink. This is about finding connection. This is what you're craving right now. And sometimes the surest way that we can, go back to that really negative self-talk is to compare ourselves and to see something that looks really good and go, that's not me. And by comparison, mine isn't as good. Now, it's interesting because that perspective can shift. And I know for a fact that there'd be people in that party that could be surrounded by people and feel as lonely as anything. And I've been in that position. So it's like in a short space of time, I can actually forget that if the shoe's on the other foot, some people in that party would actually be envious of you right now, being sober on the beach, chilling out, and not having to pretend to be something they're not. So it's always this constant thing about, what am I actually missing here? What am I actually craving? And it's never the drink. Like the smell of it like repulses me. And like when I see people drink, they don't repulse me necessarily, but it's like I see the fakeness come in, and I see people not being themselves, and I see people overdoing it or overreaching. And I see that, I'm like, I don't miss that. But having said all of that, like I'm sober today, thank God, but I've got no idea about tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Like I've learnt that I need to just be happy with my sobriety today. And like that is more than enough today. Because when I drank, I had no interest in the present, like not at all. I was always thinking about tomorrow in a very negative way, or I was always feeling very gloomy and sad about my past. And so to not be in those two states is like incredible.
My lonely sober days don't even compare to my lonely hungover days. Don't even compare, right? Patrick, this will be my last question. I've loved chatting to you, and I feel like you're the right person to ask this. After how many years are you sober now?
3 years and 9 months, but who's counting?
3 years, 9 months and 2 days and 2 seconds.
2 days and 25 seconds, yeah.
What is something you've discovered about sober Patrick that you absolutely love?
Wow, that's a good question. I love that I'm interested in people. And I love that I got here about 15 minutes early, and I walked in here and I just chatted with your team for 10, 15 minutes. There's no way I'm doing that when I was drinking. There's absolutely no way. I would have stood outside, I would have looked in, peered in, and just felt like, so that kind of being accessible and wanting to actually seek human connection is incredible. I know it's not a personality trait, but it's such a long way from where I was. And that in itself, like the external things, you know, some of them have come back into my life. A lot of them haven't. And there are days where I go, oh, geez, I wish that could be a little bit more. But I've also learned that this is a really tough process because I'm not absolutely crystal clear on like the details of your story, but like I've drunk longer than I've been sober by about 4 years for me. And so even though it's been a bit of time in sobriety, I've spent more time being in that state of what I've described in this chat, that it's not all just going to roll out the window over an X amount of time. Like it takes a continual recommitting to it. But in answer to your question, it's being interested in other people, being prepared to listen to people more than I have. And because of that, I have more friends in my life today than like real friends. I've got more friends, but like people that actually know me and people that I don't feel the need to be anything more or less than what I am when I'm around them. And if someone said to me that you could get sober and the only thing you get is that, I would have said that, where do I sign up? Because that outweighs and outlasts any external material status prestige. It just doesn't even compare. So I'm very grateful for that.
And I'm so grateful you came in. I noticed that, and I love that about people. Do you like that when people, you know, it's like they feel the fear and they just do it anyway. And I think with sobriety, that's what you do. You push down that wall so much easier. And I'm so glad you did. And I'm really, really grateful that you've joined me today on Soberly Speaking.
Pleasure. And you know, thank you for doing this because recovery is really hard for people to access, and people don't just go, I need help and I know where to access it and I'll go and find it. I used to listen to lots of podcasts when I was drinking and people getting sober, and even while I was drunk, but listening to people actually share their stories, after a period of time, it just feels like you have an army of people behind you already. And that's so important to seek recovery because doing it alone is next to impossible. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much.